What is going on, guys? Skyhound, also known as Geek Detective Pierce. So, I finished watching the final chapter of Sailor Moon, as is shown on the little banner down below. This is just going to be my general thoughts, no spoilers whatsoever. And also the fact that, my limited Japanese and all that, I'll just try to keep it at least straight to the point. So, despite having not read the manga section of this arc, I do want to at least go over a few things. What's clear is that Galaxia is supposedly the main enemy of Sailor Moon in this case. And while the trailer did point out basically the doubt and fears that are gnawing at Usagi's mind in having to face another enemy, but in the form of a Sailor Scout, one like herself, but on the dark side. Now, originally, this final season, Stars, was not going to be dubbed until a certain point. Now, when exactly did that happen? Well, I can tell you right now. 2019. Before the nonsense of 2020 kicked in. How do I know this? There was a panel at Anime Expo in 2019. I attended that panel. You can likely look it up on YouTube. It's there somewhere. But there was a panel, and they made the announcement that they were finally going to dub the Star season. Now, guess as to why they were hesitant in trying to do it in the first place. 3 reasons. Well, actually, 1 reason, but because of 3 characters. If you know who I'm talking about, kudos to you. At least you're paying attention. However, what I like about this film is it's more in line with the events of the manga. Most Sailor Moon fans tell me that the original was chock full of filler, whereas this one cuts straight to the point. Now, I will admit that there are some elements that are strictly manga related that's not in the original. For one, this is not going to be a spoiler, but I will say this. Chibi Chibi and what she really represents. I may not have watched the original, but her manifestation during the final episode, it's different from the manga. In short, she has a certain identity. And it is not just the starlights that notice. Chibiusa herself notices this when she and the Amazon Quartet have to help Sailor Moon and Kakyu when they're going off against Galaxia's minions. Now, I did do a little mini thread with regards to parts 1 and 2. Again, I had to go off what was on the Wikipedia page, but I have my doubts in terms of how accurate it is. Why? Because the dialogue between the characters, some parts I understood, other parts I did not. So I'm not only reading the Japanese subtitles, but at the same time, I'm also looking at the visuals, trying to correlate both ends and seeing what comes of it, and see whether or not I was actually paying attention. To an extent, I will say that parts 1 and 2 do um, give that sense of finality to a degree. And while the ending of it may not be what some people expect, the main point of it, which I will eventually cover in the spoiled filled version, at least to the best of my ability, soon enough, what the main point of this film is trying to cover, from my observation, despite being a beginner in Japanese, I know this is going to go over the heads of Americans, even though I was born here. So why do I constantly keep bashing not just my country, but other countries? Simple. You have lunatics that are being racist towards Japan. It is not just America, it is also Europe, it is also the Middle East, it is also other countries that pretend to be fans, and they are not. They are pathological liars. Why else do I say stupidity is unbiased? Because that is the truth of all countries. So, to hell with feelings, to hell with pronouns. This is why, when I was watching the special regarding Sailor Moon and all that, the dumb responses of Americans prove my point again and again. And then, for those of you who think I'm going to apologize, no, I am not apologizing for anything. I am standing for the truth and nothing but it, the truth. So, if facts are going to annoy you, don't bother with my channel. Go watch something else. Because 1, you prove you are not a fan. Number 2, you don't know anything about the IP. And 3, you are just leeching off of others just to fatten your own ego. So, in general, the story is somewhat straightforward. It does try to deviate in terms of what the main objective is. But I will say this. The resolve that Usagi tries to convey near the end, and the fact that she's willing to give up her own life just to save others, is a heroic manner in and of itself. She cares not only for her friends, but also her future husband-to-be, Mamoru. And the fact that Americans have forgotten basically fundamentals regarding biology and all of that, prove that a certain side of the spectrum is uneducated, immature, and illiterate. Again, I'll say it again. Stupidity is unbiased. Modernism is a cancer. This is why gatekeeping to an extent is needed. This is why Americans are dumb. This is why I bash my own country. I've always had a like and a major dislike relationship. It will always be that way. I will forever stand by it. It is a hill I will die on. And nothing uneducated, modern liberals will say will ever change my mind. I am forever standing by it. Now, with regards to at least the second half of the film, I will say this. It tries to go into at least what the opponents are and how they were deceived. With that being said, I do notice a certain parallel where you have a dark force that destroys the lifestyle of certain people. You can make rough historical parallels to this, or even literary ones. So basically, chaos is like, if I'm going to be using parallels here, Sauron from Lord of the Rings, he is a deceiver. Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, or there's another character, but I'm drawing a blank. Those two in particular that I just listed, you can sort of see how chaos is exactly like them. He deceives individuals into granting them supposed great power, but that is a lie. There's another fictional character I can draw the parallel between chaos and these other characters. Voldemort from Harry Potter. The so-called false promise of power to change the world, and then the descent into darkness. Basically, chaos is telling these individuals, this life that you're having, I can help make it better if you would just join me. Which is basically what Galaxia is. She is a puppet to the darkness. And she was deceived. Yes, we get a bit of background on the character, but despite what is depicted, despite what people presume to see, I will say it again. I'm going to circle back to it. Stupidity is unbiased. It is not just men who are at fault. Women are also at fault. Women are also deceivers. Women lie. Women cheat. Women make mistakes. I am saying this because I am not a misandrist. I am saying this because it is a fundamental, irrefutable fact. So, There are some funny bits with the film, with the starlights, in the fact that um, you get how jealous both the inner and outer senshi are. Basically, yes, Amy Mizuno is the brains of the group. She gets jealous. Um, Haruka being the tomboy, um, she also gets jealous. Michiru herself, um, despite being graceful, beautiful, and talented with music and all of that, she also gets jealous of the starlights. And what I find amusing is the fact that, yes, they sort of antagonize the starlights at first. However, what I find fascinating is Usagi sees something they don't. Parallel to the fact that Chibiusa is also, in a sense, emulating her mother. How is that possible? Well, if you look back on the Pharaoh 90 arc and Hotaru, her being the um, so called, I wouldn't say embodiment of death, but she is death and rebirth, as is, her introduction line. Basically, she is um, the embodiment of death and rebirth. And her planet, is the guardian of death and rebirth. So the outer senshi, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, originally saw her as a threat. Mars herself has a premonition and she sees death and destruction. She and the other inner senshi are literally on the same page as the outer senshi with regards to Otaru. Chibiusa is the only one that sees something different, and eventually Sailor Moon herself is also mirroring that same conviction that her daughter has, that there's something about this girl that is not what the others think. So, in that sense, when we get to um, Chibi Chibi and her introduction, yes, there's some parallels to her and Usagi. However, what she really is, Chibiusa figures that out. And it does take time for Sailor Moon to piece it together. And with regards to betrayal and all of that, Galaxia herself gets betrayed because she has her own agenda. Chaos has its own agenda. And overall, what the main message tries to convey about um, death, life, and then, the cards you are dealt. And I'm saying this also metaphorically because the starlights also have their own princess. And one of the songs, albeit how brief it is, it took me several times to listen to it. And what is clear is they're searching for somebody, they're looking for someone. And Usagi sort of gets the fact that they're trying to protect someone. They're looking for someone that is, precious to them. Just like Usagi and her friends, you know, they're valuable to Usagi. Just like, her love to Mamoru is also precious to her. And the lives that she is trying to protect as a Sailor Senshi. So, with that being said, there's an interesting moment where Chibi Chibi comes to someone, and that someone is Sailor Kakyu. Lo and behold, when Chibi Chibi is brought over to the house, or somehow finds her way to the house, there's a little container that she finds, and she leaves it in Usagi's room. But the interesting thing is when Chibi Chibi is found out by the Starlights, and the Starlights get all defensive, they hear a familiar voice stating, don't, harm this little girl. She is a friend. And I'm just roughly recollecting what I saw from the film. And they find the princess that they were looking for. And I know I mentioned it before, but I recognize the voice. And obviously, if you watched my little general thoughts on the packaging and the contents of the limited edition, which I own, I kind of geek out and mention about some of the roles that singer slash voice actress Nana Mizuki has played. If you guys need a quick refresher, she has played Hinata from Naruto. She has voiced the main heroine from Rosario Vampire. She has voiced Cure Blossom from Heartcatch Precure, which is a flower-themed magical girl entry in the Precure series. She has also voiced Tsubasa from Symphogear. And she has also voiced one of my favorite magical girls, Feito Testarossa from Mahou Shoujo Ririka Nanoha. And with that being said, the one thing that doesn't surprise me is the fact that Sela Star Faita, I think, is the leader of the trio. She obviously likes Usagi. And the interesting thing is with Sailor Kakyu, there's a little thing that I will mention. This is not exactly a spoiler, but this is part of, I guess I could say, the plot and story. She keeps getting cards, and it seems vague in terms of what it is. One could say they're like tarot cards, but yes, they are, and at the same time, they're not. I mean, I'll leave that part up to you, the viewers, to try and interpret what that moment is. Because she gets a few of those in the mail. Someone is sending it. It is not Mamoru per se, but we know someone is sending it to her. Later on, as the film progresses, you find that is the Starlights that has these cards and are somehow able to explain the significance of these cards. What is in them? What is, their purpose and all of that. And overall, when they're trying to remind Usagi, you know, what is your purpose? What is your mission? In contrast to what Galaxia is doing, trying to sow seeds of despair, doubt, and, you know, sadness. What you see is the difference in how Usagi's perspective eventually changes from part one to part two. And she's trying to see the positive, trying to see the good in others, despite the fact that, she has to fight to protect her galaxy and the Earth. You have these antagonists that keep trying to challenge her viewpoint. Is, all this violence, all this fighting, to protect the said future really worth it? And on a philosophical note, this film does try to convey that. Is that if you don't fight, you will not only die, but at the same time, you will have failed in being a guardian. And one of the duties of a guardian is to fight whatever evils are trying to destroy your world, if you will. However, one thing that I think the film does try to bring up is basically what does it mean to fight? What does it mean to live? And what does it mean to die for what you believe in? I think the author at least tries to address this in her own way, but with the drawback of modern technology and social media in general, this stuff gets lost in translation so fast that very few are capable of reading into what the author is trying to say. And again, I'm circling back to what I said before about fake geeks. They do exist, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender, regardless of political affiliation. They are there to be a parasite. They are there to destroy hobbies. They are there to sow discord. And at the same time, they are projecting and proving that they don't know anything about the IP. Simple as that. And frankly, I think this film does try to get their philosophical portion of the film um, without being too preachy. And unfortunately, Americans, as hypocritical as they are, they have lost their way. They don't know anything about literature. They don't know anything about Japan. They don't know anything about pop culture in general, which is why they constantly keep having an identity crisis. Now, why is that? When the fight is over, when evil has been defeated, what then? This type of thing has been addressed numerous times, not just in other shows and films and other anime that I've seen, but also in literature itself. What happens when you are of no use anymore? When basically what happens when you're trying to fight monsters without becoming that which you hate? This is not only aimed at me, this is aimed at every person on the planet. Are there some that can write? Yes. Are there some that can create? Yes. To deviate just a little bit, I am going to quote two films that I love to quote on a daily basis. Number one, the Disney Pixar film Ratatouille. The critic, when he says the following: not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. The world is often cruel to those who are new, that try to create. And that last bit I'm just paraphrasing here. Number two, Jurassic Park. Heaven knows how many times I keep going on about the dark side of the corporate world, and then, trying to control nature. As Dr. Ian Malcolm so perfectly put it, and I'm paraphrasing here, so bear with me. Yeah, but your corporate artists have been so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. Of course, the original quote, yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. Now, the the negative feedback that Dr. Malcolm is giving with regards to tampering with things that shouldn't be tampered. This is something that has not just been addressed with literature, but with arguably many things. Are there some that are qualified for the job? Yes. Are there some that are unqualified and still infect these positions? Whether it is in science, whether it is in education, whether it is in sports? Yes. So, to put bluntly, some people should never have a job, and there's some that shouldn't even be artists, writers, doctors, teachers, whatever. And yet we have already gotten to the point of, strong times create great men create good times create weak men, and weak men create tough times. We are well past that point, and yet I suspect this is going to drag on for some time. And frankly, former institutions, especially in America, need to suffer, and they haven't suffered enough. But anyway, overall, I will say that what this film, Sailor Moon Cosmos, tries to do in terms of addressing what the original author was trying to convey, I think they did a good job in terms of what they're trying to do. Visually, they did try to capture a good amount of the 90s aesthetic. I mean, if you look back on how Crystal started, it was more on the manga style. Post Crystal, it went more 90s anime. But with that, they stuck to at least what the manga was trying to convey. So do I think they're successful in that? Yes. Does it respect the manga? Yes. Does it address at least the main themes of what the show is trying to do? Yes, to an extent. A lot better than Americans ever could. Why? Because Japan, despite their flaws, knows their material better than any other country. Now, do other countries do better than Americans? Hell yes. And frankly, I have read online where you have these countries telling Americans to keep your mouth shut, do your job, or we will do it for you. And frankly, I welcome that. I welcome that wholeheartedly. Why? Why am I doing this? Why am I even saying it? Because people have kept saying Americans have lost their way. Russia has been saying it. Europe has been saying it. However, Europe has also been a mirror to America. So, Americans have been hypocritical. Europe has been hypocritical. And I'm not apologizing for that. Anyway, I know I've been bouncing around. I am giving my general thoughts. And I pretty much covered all I need to cover which is why I've been bouncing around a little bit. But if you guys like this video, do feel free to like and subscribe. Feel free to share it if you like. And eventually I will be going over this film in longer detail. And of course, I have said what I needed to say about the problems in the American side when it comes to anime, the problems with literature and with the media in general. And I will eventually be trying to cover, at least make an attempt to cover, a certain British assassin. Since you know what that is, I will eventually put in the community post below after I cover Brosnan. What do you suggest I would cover from there in terms of the films? So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay safe, stay humble. Peace.